Yeah, g'day everyone. Another video. Today we're going to talk about wet chain. Now you're going to be going, hey, what? And that's what I sort of thought when I first come across that. So these are not my views. These are the views that you can find from certain companies out there that produce what we refer to as what could be used in wet conditions. So first of all, we'll talk about the most popular chain of all before we get to wet chain, and that's semi-chisel. And the reason it's so popular, it's got that nice radius, that working corner. And you've got to blunten all that corner there before it stops working. So that's the first part that becomes blunt before it needs resharpening, and obviously the side plate and the top plate becomes blunt as well. But it's the point that becomes the bluntest because it's the first point of contact. And even more so on your full chisel. So your full chisel comes to that very sharp point. So easy to become blunt. So typically 90% of people will be using semi-chisel and small percentage using full chisel. Where do you use full chisel? Well, I use full chisel quite a lot. And it works fantastic in green timber, but in very hard dried timber, it'll tend to go blunt and much quicker, but certainly in soft timber. So people that are overseas that are cutting some softer type timber, especially Pinus radiata, this is going to cut through Pinus radiata like a knife through butter. But put it through some Australian timber, and it's going to go blunt much quicker than semi-chisel. But I do find that the hexa profile is a little bit more durable than the full chisel. Now, we actually do have the hardest wood in the world. Top left-hand corner, Australian bull oak. It is the hardest on the Janka scale. I think it's 5,000 pounds, which is about 16.7 on the Janka scale. Now, that's the hardest wood in the world. And when this wood dries out, it's even harder. The Janka scale, I think it could be, they measure it at 12% moisture, because the Janka scale actually comes from Australia. It was an international standard now. It was invented in 1922, that scale, and it's a little round metal ball. And the metal ball gets pushed into I think it's about 12 millimeters in diameter. And the whole idea is the ball's got to go halfway into the wood, and depends on the load on there. So Australian bull oak was the hardest wood in the world, and as I said, it's 5,000 pounds, or on the Janka scale in kilonewtons, it's 15.7. Now, I'm cutting grey box, and on the Janka scale, that's about 14.7 to 15 if it's measured around 12%. They use the Janka scale mainly for floorboards and furniture to be a certain hardness with a certain moisture level. So it is interesting as to what chain that you will choose to cut your wood. You'll hear all sort of people from all over the world that will turn around and recommend this type of special semi-chisel, whether it's from Oregon, whether it's from Stihl, or you'll hear other people recommend the full chisel. And then you've got variants of that. You've got the hexa from Stihl, and you've also got the X-cut from Husqvarna. So you've got all these different ones with all these different recommendations. I'm not recommending anything. I'm just sort of telling you what's out there. Which brings us back to the point of a wet chain. And you go, what's a wet chain? A wet chain is simply a chain that works better with a species of tree that's very high in moisture. So if you've got a living tree and it's got to be cut down, and even if you've got a moisture gauge and you were to check, you can find 60-70% on the outside of the bark, and inside in excess of 24% moisture. While this moisture can aid lubrication, in certain species with certain fibres, it can be a bit of a hindrance, and you can find out it can cause problems with chip evacuation. It can even jam up the bar, especially if you're doing a palm tree. Oh my God, those things have got to be the worst thing you could cut with a chainsaw. Better off using 404 chain on that and going a little bit slow. So, chamfer chisel, and if we look up in the top left-hand corner, Oregon make a lot of these, and they are suggesting that it actually works very, very good in wet timber. So that's it. It's not my recommendation personally. It's a recommendation from a lot of other companies out there that suggest chamfer chisel is great in wet timber. So even though these two do cut quite well, the whole three of them, your semi-chisel, your full chisel, your hexa, your X-cut, they'll work all right in wet timber. But certain species of wet timber, you'll find out that the chamfer chisel works quite good. And I believe that most of the chamfer chisels are in the smaller chains. I haven't come across chamfer chisel in 404 or even 3/8 standard, because one thing that's interesting about the chainsaw industry, and still are the same, this chain here is a skip chain, but nowhere on the box, so when you buy it, that's what you've got on there. It doesn't even tell you it's a skip chain. All as it says is 1364 file. It tells you about the raker height. It tells you about the top plate cutting angle to be filed at 30 degrees. And it tells you that it's 36 cutters, RS, 18 aside, 72 drive links. That's it. Tells you the gauge width, 063, and it's 3/8 or 9.32 millimeters. So, and you'll see a little picture of the chain and it'll just say super. So, a lot of the chains that are out there, they have numbers. In Husqvarna for the X-cut, they do actually have the word X-cut, but they'll say C85, C83. And sometimes they're designated by numbers and just some letters that are not easy to decipher. So, but anyway, this video was just to turn around and tell you that it's not a specialised chain, the chamfer, but it is a chain that is a little bit different. Because if we go back, even in the day of Joseph Burford Cox, had invented the Cox chipper chain, and he also invented the full chisel, and then Ray Carlton invented the semi-chisel, which he actually had a lot of trouble getting that through to be passed, because I guess the semi-chisel and the chipper chain, very similarity, but the full chisel, totally different, square corner as opposed to round corner. Somebody come up with the chamfer chisel, and I don't know what year it was, but it's in between the semi and the full. So it's got a place out there. And as I said, I'm just giving you the information. You do what you will with the information, but I hope that's helpful. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.